Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Kim and today I thought we'd do a February reading wrap up. As I'm doing TBRs now, I thought why not just pop on here and tell you what I read last month, what ratings I gave each book. So yeah, let's get down to it, shall we? So in the month of February, I read 11 books. It's not bad for me considering I didn't read that much in January. I read a total of 4,988 pages. That breaks down to roughly 178 pages per day. I think that my rating's a little skewed because of a certain chunker that took me a month and a half to read. We'll get to that later. And I gave an average this month of 3.9 stars. So not a bad month, not my best month. So let's get into what I actually read this month. So the first book that I read was for the Rory Gilmore book club, which this month was to read a short story or a play. I tied that in with the buzzword readathon, which was a verb for this month. And it was also my Bookopoly roll for a chance card. So for this, I read Driving Miss Daisy. I loved this. This was hilarious, heartwarming and heartbreaking all at the same time. Stunning. 5 stars. The second book that I read this month was my Agatha Christie Poirot read-along. It is also on Bookopoly to read a sequel. So I read Five Little Pigs by Agatha Christie. This one wasn't the strongest for me, so I only got 3 stars. The third book that I read this month is the First Law read-along book for the month, which was The Blade Itself by Jo Abercrombie. This one I actually quite liked. It is the beginning of a series, so I've started another series, but it's a good one. And I should be sticking to the schedule, so I should get this finished along with everybody else. I gave this one 4 stars. The fourth book that I read this month was the Wheel of Time book for this month, which was the second in the series. It is The Great Hunt by Robert Jordan. Again, another series that I started end of last year. And again, I liked this one. This was also on Bookopoly to steal a book, so I did like this one as well. I did give this one 4 stars as well. Okay, the fifth book that I read this month was on Bookopoly for Faro. It is, of course, Faro Feb, so that was a great land on that one. And for this, I read Savage Bonds by Jay Bree. And again, I liked this one, but I didn't like it as good as the first book. This only got 4 stars. The sixth book that I read this month was on Bookopoly to read a family pick. This one, I got my mum involved and she told me to read a sequel. She knows what I'm like. So she got me to read Reflected in You by Sylvia Day. This one, again, not as good as the first one. This one, I just didn't gel with the characters as much as I did in the first one. There wasn't the tension that I wanted between the two characters. So for this one, again, I only got 3 stars. The seventh book that I read this month, or should I say the seventh book that I finished this month. Yes, I finally finished it. Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. Now, I almost DNF'd this book in the middle. It took a long time to read this book, but the end was worth it. The end was worth it. So, because of the little dip in the middle, it does only get 4 stars. The eighth book that I read this month was Kingdom of the Cursed, finally, by Kerri Maniscalco. This is the absolutely stunning Fairylit edition. Oh, I do love this edition. This one, again, it wasn't as good as the first book. There were reasons, but I still loved the series, so I will be continuing. I will be reading the last book, but this one got 4 stars. It was also on Bookopoly to read a fantasy, so There we go. The 9th book that I read this month was on Bookopoly to read a book box book. So for that, I chose the absolutely stunning copy of Twin Crowns by Catherine Doyle and Catherine Webber. Absolutely stunning. I love that foiling and it looks amazing on the shelf. This one, I actually really quite liked this one, not gonna lie. This one, I like the two characters, I like the warring and the fact that they switch, and loved it. So for this, it got 4 stars. The 10th book that I read this month was on my Bookopoly to read an author that I want to read more from this year. And it's also a Faro Feb book, which is great. I read, finally, A Shadow in the Envelope by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I'm slowly catching up. I'm just freaking out my cat by doing that. This one, again, I did love it. It did get 4 stars. And that completed my Bookopoly TBR for this month. But I did read one more. I read an 11th book. The 11th book that I read this month was just a fly off the wall. It's popping up absolutely everywhere, so I had to pick it up. And it is How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. This was twisted and wicked and I loved it. The only thing I didn't like was that I listened to it on audio and the voice of the doll really grated on me. So for that reason, it did get 4 stars. So that is everything that I read this month in February. I read 11 books in February. What will March hold? As always, down in my description box, you'll find a link to all of my socials. Come give me a follow on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Goodreads. You can like this video, you can comment, and you can subscribe if you really want to. But until next time, doodles.